What's the best way to prep soils if you're going to be growing cover crops on your farm? I'm Rod from Dowdle Family Farms, and I'm on a mission to grow more of our livestock feed on our farm using cover crops and livestock, while at the same time reducing our reliance on imported grain, herbicides, pesticides, and especially synthetic fertilizers. In this video, I want to discuss some of the different soil prep options that you have when using a no-till drill. Before we get started, let me show you the no-till drill that we have. So this is the LMC Ag NTGD 78. It's their lighter weight version of their no-till drill. It's got 10 rows that are spaced 7 1/4 inches apart. Now, it's a great drill to use with smaller tractors. This is a John Deere 4044M. So if you're a small farmer or even growing food plots, it is a great drill to use. But there are a few challenges to using it. One is to say that it does not have traditional closing wheels like your more expensive no-till drills. So it's not going to be able to cover the seed very well unless you're in a really finely disked soil, or unless you've flail mowed or something and there's some material that those flaps can kind of drag behind it. All that to say, there are benefits to this type of drive wheel. I'll talk about that in the review video. I purchased this drill in January. It's now May, and I've planted, about 35 acres of different cover crops with it. But in this video, I want to focus on prepping the ground for these cover crops. I just mentioned this drill so that you'll know that it does not have closing wheels like your standard no-till drill will have. That may affect how you prep the soil. So this is the very first field that I planted, and it was pretty much bare when I planted it, and we got outstanding germination in some of our cool season crops. Let me turn the camera around and show you. This is the first paddock that I seeded with a no-till drill back in January or February. At the time, it was bare soil and it was wet. And I had some clover seed that I wanted to plant. I also had some ostrich and winter peas that I didn't really expect to germinate, but I wanted some oats or grazing wheat or something to mix with it. I used the oats just as a carrier for those different seeds. The drill that I'm using will plant smaller seeds. The problem is when you're talking about putting 5 pounds per acre on, it just doesn't handle that quite well. So I used the oats, and you can see that a few of them germinated. I don't see, there's some of the oats right there, and you can tell that they germinated. You can see the ostrich and winter peas, but what you can see really growing, they're about dead this time of the year, but are the different clovers. We've got Balanza clover, a little Alsike clover, and then some red clover and white Dutch clover as well. I came back over here about a month and a half ago. This had a decent stand. It wasn't nearly as thick as this, but I overseeded it with our warm season cover crop mix. I did not graze it, didn't bush hog it, didn't spray it, didn't do anything other than just seeding back over it. You can see some of the warm season cover crops growing in here. Here are the cowpeas. There's some sunflower growing, along with a few of the other crops. I'm not really pleased with the germination rates. I don't know if the soil was too wet, if the seed was covered too much, or if there was just too much competition. We'll see once we get some more rain. This spring has been incredibly dry for us on our farm. When I planted the cool season crops though, the drill made slits in the ground. In fact, I thought it was planting it too deep. And then the seeds were not covered up. But what I found is when we got rain, not only did those trenches that the seed were dropped in hold more water so that the seeds could germinate, many times those trenches kind of covered up with a light film of mud that helped the seed germinate even more. There are some areas where the warm season cover crops got a better start. You can see here, for example, that more of the sorghum sudan grass is growing. That's this tall grass right there. You can also see the sunflowers like right there, the cowpeas right there, and some other stuff like chicory and all. Let's take a look at how we overseeded these warm season cover crops into our cool season cover crops and take a look over there. Now I'm standing in a transitional part of a paddock that covers 3 different kind of types of plantings here, or settings. In this paddock, you can see that this ryegrass has gone to seed. Earlier this spring in March, I planted a spring pea oat blend from green cover seed. You can see how it's grown and germinating. The oats did okay as well. Occasionally you can see some of them starting to go to seed as well. Now this part over here is where we had a good bit of rain. The pigs were in here and they just mucked up this entire part of the field. In fact, it was too wet for me to plant when I planted the pea oat mix, and so I just left it bare for the time being. But I did have a ryegrass, clover, and some other crops, but the pigs just kind of annihilated all it, tore it up when they were walking up and down this part of the pasture that was so wet, it just kind of messed everything up. Up here though, where you see the ryegrass heading out, I planted a spring pea oat mix. You can see some of the peas here, you can see some of the oats going to seed there, and it germinated through a lot of the ryegrass. The pigs had kind of knocked down most of the ryegrass and some of the other stuff. There was a little bit of it standing, but not much. So I overseeded the warm season cover crops in it, and you can see the sorghum sudan grass germinating, for example. You can see the forage soybeans right there and the sunflowers right there. Oh, there's a good one right there too. So things are growing, but there's some competition and it's not doing quite as well, or at least it doesn't look like it is, as this part of the paddock over here. But if you turn back and look this direction toward those willow trees, there's something that you can tell a huge difference on. You'll notice that there's a sudden jump right here where the warm season cover crops are doing better, the chicory's doing better, and everything else is performing so much more effectively. There is a little bit like right here that was wet and it's not doing quite as well. The reason that this is doing so much better, but the pigs were out here for about 7 or 8 weeks along with a paddock over there, and you can tell, I mean almost in a straight line where the fence is, that this is just performing so much better because of where the pigs were grazing. Both fields had basically the same cover crop mix in there. This one was planted later, but because the pigs were on this for several weeks along with a paddock over there, it's just performed so much better. One of the things that I think people often underestimate is the value of pigs on soil health and soil biology. So often people say pigs root up pastures, they form wallows, and they'll make a royal mess. And I do not deny that pigs will root up your pastures, they will make a little bit of a mess. They're not going to have smooth pastures that you can drive over at 10 or 15 miles an hour. At the same time, however, it has a much better long-term effect on soil health. And you can just see the huge difference that it makes. Look at how tall this sorghum sudan grass here. This is in that wetter part that didn't grow very well, but you can still see how tall that sorghum sudan grass is. See how rich it is. And let me take you to 2 more parts of the farm and show you what we've done over there. The fields that I've shown you so far have been growing for 4 to 6 weeks. The field that I'm standing in here is planted 2 weeks ago. Now, it's a very different field. We've never had pigs over here. We did plant sorghum sudan grass and some other stuff here last summer. We grazed it with the cows. We weren't able to do a lot of real intensive grazing, but it did have cover crops grown over here. Last fall, I disked it and planted it with some brassicas, hairy vetch on one side, and clovers all over. And I also had some cereal rye, and ryegrass is the thing that performed the most. I grazed this 5-acre field really hard with our cows. I was strip grazing it, and so this was grazed really hard. I put a back fence right around here somewhere. Actually, I put a back fence right there where that bare spot is on the ground, just past Charlotte on the side-by-side, and then grazed everything up there. Once the cows grazed that, I brought them back over here to graze this for a day or 2 and just to knock it back down. The day that I moved the cows off, I planted it with our warm season cover crop mix. The soil was almost bare in some parts over there. If you look carefully, you can see the little rows of forage, predominantly the sorghum sudan grass that has grown. So it's germinated and growing there. But you look right over here beside it, and it was planted, it's just not growing. If it gets enough moisture here pretty soon, most of those seeds that I planted will germinate. Soil moisture, I think, is the key to getting a decent stand in your fields. And how much soil moisture you need depends on what kind of drill you have. But if you've got a drill like mine that on hard soils barely scratches the soil surface, you're going to have to wait until you have some rain or irrigate it. Now, let me take you to one more part of the farm. Now, I'm out here south of Dowdle Road. Where we were is about a quarter of a mile that way. But on this part of the farm, this is some of the worst performing soils that we've never done anything with in terms of cover crops. Now, very similar soil types to where we were up there, but on each of those fields, I've grown cover crops for at least a year now. Down here, I have not. So this spring, what I did is I came over here and I overseeded into this field with that pea oat blend from Green Cover Seed. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff growing out here at the time, and there was some soil moisture, but it wasn't particularly dry. And you can see all the peas that are starting to die out here. You can see that it got a decent stand, but they did not germinate very well. I planted the oats and the peas at roughly 100 pounds per acre, and you can tell here that they germinated, but at that rate, the oats and the peas should have shot up much, much more dramatically. But I went on and they were still pretty small, and I overseeded this with our warm season cover crop mix. Again, same stuff that I planted up there. You can see the cowpeas right here and there. You can see a little bit of sunflower. Man, that's a poor looking sunflower plant. And you can see a little bit of sorghum Sudan grass, like right here and there, but you just don't see quite as much. The point that I'm wanting to make here, though, is that with all this, I just drilled the warm season cover crop mix directly into this while there was very little competition. The warm season weeds had not started growing yet, and we got very, very poor results. I'm going to take you to two more spots on this part of the farm. The first one will be right up here where I tried disking, and I want to show you what I did there to prep the soil too. Now, because of the poor germination down there with a pea and oat blend, I ran the disc over this half acre. It's a long strip, so it wasn't very wide, and you can see where it germinated. And at first glance, it looks like we got some phenomenal growth. You'll see a bunch of random weeds that, yes, they'll benefit the soil, yes, they'll do some stuff, but for the most part, they're not nearly as great as our warm season cover crop mix. You can still see a little bit of sorghum Sudan grass here and there. You can see like that sunflower there. And then there are a few patches where the buckwheat and the sorghum Sudan grass has grown and germinated relatively well. But for the most part, the germination is sporadic, and it has not performed very well. Still, you just expect much better performance on something like this than others. Now, you'll notice here that this looks like it's been sprayed. It has, but let me show you this final prep that I've tried. Now, this whole field has not been planted at the same time. This part of the field over there I planted just last weekend, and we haven't gotten any rain since. But a large portion of that field over there to the edge of the trees and this outline here demonstrates one of the things that I wanted to share. We've only gotten 3/10 of an inch of rain since this crop was drilled in. I did spray it. I don't like using herbicide. I don't like using glyphosate. But one of the things that I've found is the combination of the hard soils and not having grown cover crops in an area before, when we have a lot of weed pressure, when we have a lot of stuff that the cows won't graze, this was not a field where the cows would graze the bulk of the forage. I put the cows in here at really high rates for several days. Actually, it hurt the animal performance a little bit, but I wanted them to eat every single thing that was of some kind of value for them. And they ate the clover down to the ground. They ate a lot of the other stuff. Glyphosate doesn't kill clover. But really, all I wanted to do was to knock back the weeds enough to allow these warm season cover crops to germinate and to start growing. Yes, we still got some other weeds and grasses growing, but you can see where these cover crops have started germinating after we've sprayed. when I did that video showing what we did, I received a little bit of flack for it. Understand, we don't want to use herbicide, we don't want to use pesticide or synthetic fertilizers or anything else. But when you have an underperforming pasture, something drastic needs to be done. You need a lot of animal disturbance, either a lot of pigs on the field for a time. We don't have enough pigs to disturb 20 acres enough to come out here and plant right behind them, although that works really great. Once we get cover crops growing, that sorghum sudan grass will improve the soil enough that very first season that fall we can come back with our cool season cover crops, seed them in directly like we did on the other parts of the farm, and usually get decent germination. I hope this video helped offer you a little bit of context for the different ways to prep the soil. If you have cover crops growing already, we've found that we can seed generally directly into them as long as we either graze them or bush hog them and knock them back enough, especially if we have enough soil moisture to help those cover crop seeds germinate pretty quickly. They don't have the root system yet, obviously, that the established crops have, so they'll need more soil moisture up on top of the ground. If we have bare soil, that drill works really well. And then sometimes we've either got to disc the soil or we need to do something else to help intervene and allow that cover crop seed to get germinated. Take care, hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in the next one.